totally leveled, like we said. The Nazis, after the uprising, went house to house. They first firebombed all the houses because people were living in underground bunkers. They firebombed them, and then they opened a concentration camp here in Warsaw.
Are we close to the center of the ghetto? Or?
We're in the center of the ghetto. Well, to the edge of the ghetto, actually. This is more the center. And over there, they opened the concentration camp. We'll talk about it. Called Concentration Lager Warsaw. To go through all the ruins of the ghetto, look through for any belongings, any valuables, take any bricks, and scavenge what was left and capture any Jews that were left. So all these blocks are not the original blocks. All the buildings are not the original buildings. They named it this street after Zamenhof because he was a Jew, right? And Zikaboim, who was also a Jew, who worked to try to bring world awareness to what was happening. But these are not the original blocks. Now, we'll talk about the uprising because we're going to the remnant of where more or less the bunker was of one of the groups that was leading the uprising. Now, when the uprising took place in Warsaw, there were only, from 350, 400,000 Jews in the ghetto, there were only about 50,000 left. All the rest had been put on trains and taken either mostly to death camps, such as Treblinka, and within a few hours, they were ashed, and a few of them were sent to some of the work camps. The strongest people, the younger people, were still here in the ghetto because they were used for factories that were owned by German companies who bought rights to slave labor from the Germans. So they would come here, a German factory, they would open up their factory, and they would have, here, let's go over there first. They would open up their factory, they would use Jewish slave labor. Now this is closed, but I was in here. It's very, very interesting. Okay, you can see a picture over here about it. All these buildings were Jewish buildings. And underneath the buildings, they built these underground bunkers. This bunker actually was built by the Jewish smugglers. It was impossible to survive in the ghetto without smuggling. So Jewish smugglers lived here. And this was called, the name of the building, the street address was Mila 18. Really, it's a W. It's spelled with an L with a line here. It's Polish. So a W in Polish is a V. It's called Mila 18. And in this barrack, there were two main Jewish groups who led fighting in the ghetto. One was the communists, and one was the Zionists. So the Zionists, of course, played down the communist movement. But really, it wasn't really either. It was all sorts of people. Anyone. One of the reasons that the uprising only took place so late is because people didn't want collective punishment, their families to be killed. Because that's what the Nazis did. If one person didn't do something, they killed out the whole family. Right? So, they did excavations over here, and they found all sorts of amazing things. But they found in the barracks, the bunkers over here, tefillin and svarim, which means that there were people who were religious who were part of the uprising, and we know the uprising was supported by the Pietzetsna Rebbe. Now let's just take a look over here. This is the monument now, which we're going to go over there. But really, it was this. All these have underground passages and rooms underground in the whole area underneath the buildings. There's buildings on top of this.
How did they get to there?
They went through the basements and through the holes. This is what the ghetto looked like. People were on the street because they couldn't be inside. There's too many people inside. But we'll see some, more soon. So this is where actually the bunker is. This is where we are right now.
And what's the black outline?
This is
That's the ghetto.
that's where the ghetto. I mean, this is the cemetery.
Yeah.
Okay. So when they started the uprising, right, like we said, they didn't want to start it right away, and then they didn't want to start it from an area that they would shoot on the Germans and Jews would be hurt. So instead of starting it from the area where the Jews still were centered, they started it from over here, which was empty blocks that Jews already had left, and they went there. The Germans weren't expecting them to come from such an angle, and there wasn't as many Germans to shoot at, but they started shooting down on the Germans from there because if there'd be a return volley of gunfire, no one should be hurt.
Where did they get guns from?
Now, they had
Who shot who?
The Jews had an uprising, and they made Molotov cocktails. They had a few guns, they had a few weapons, and they shot at the Germans. Now, we'll talk about the uprising in a second when we go over here to Mila 18, right, to the actual monument. So let's go to the monument. What time is it? We're just keeping track for Mincha.
It's
6:34.
Okay, ready?
Can we just stop in a minute really quick? And then because I think we're done until 6.